continuing series of talking to real linguists about language acquisition and language usage. And today's guest expert is Tiffany. So welcome to the set here, our expensive set that we've spent a total of maybe $3 on. And anyway, so Tiffany speaks English, obviously, and Burmese, which is pretty unique because most of the people watching don't know anything about Burmese. So can you fill us in a little bit, like as a linguist, like the typology and the syntax and that sort of thing about Burmese?
I'll give it a whirl. So Burmese is spoken in Burma or Myanmar. Myanmar is the current name, and it's an SOV language. So it means that normally the subject and then the object and then the verb come in that order in a sentence. And it's part of the Tibeto-Burman language family. So the bigger family is Sino-Tibetan, and that includes Chinese and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And so is it tonal?
Yeah, it's tone. It's not real clear. Linguists actually think different things about the tone.
About the tone?
Yeah.
Okay. And so then that must mean that it's got a lot of, is vowel length distinctive?
Vowel length isn't, but there's some different, maybe register things going on with stop vowels and creaky tones and stuff like that. Not everyone agrees which is which. Yeah.
In comparison, like okay, like it'd be interesting for everyone to know how did you go about learning Burmese, and how long did it take you? I mean, I know your level is good. I mean, because you're functional, you're not a tourist. She can do everything. I saw an interview with you actually in Burmese that you did here. You did with Burmese students.
Oh, yeah,
and then all of a sudden you're in it. I'm like, wait a minute, she's not Burmese, but yeah. So I mean, and I can verify. Their level is actually, well, it has to be to be in the program here, but so how did you go about learning Burmese, and how was the process? And
it was hard. It's not easy, but it was a lot of fun. I like the language. I like the people in the country. I've had contact and just was really motivated to learn. So that's a big part of it.
Right.
I've done, you asked sort of about methods or
yes,
something.
yeah. How did you go about learning, or who taught you, or where and all that?
Right. So I've actually studied Burmese in 4 different countries.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was first exposed to it, like the very first ever exposure was actually on arrival in Myanmar.
Okay.
So the first time was there, and then when I returned from that to Canada, which is where I'm from, I did a little bit wherever I could. I've taken an actual course in the U.S., but a lot of my time I've done here in Chiang Mai in Thailand.
Oh,
yeah. So methods too, it was mostly really informal stuff. Mostly it was me, the learner, and then some friend or helper that I could connect with and grab and say, would you be able to spend a few hours with me so many times a week?
Right.
You know about your language, and you seem like the kind of person who's willing to help, who's able to explain things and stuff. But in general, they weren't really tutors, and
right.
I wasn't really
helpers.
Trained as a learner either myself. So it's been really all kinds of methods which are not actually official methods.
Right. But what would you? Well, it's strange because Burmese, I know, is not. It's difficult to find, like in Canada or in the United States, people who. Well, difficult one to find Burmese. 2, it's difficult to find some place that you could learn Burmese outside of a few like programs. In Ivy League schools have Burmese, but how would you, if somebody wanted to learn Burmese, what would be your recommendation, since you've had to suffer and pay the dues of it to move forward with the language?
Right. The resources are really limited. I think they're starting to grow, like in terms of books or programs, computer programs or something, but also programs at schools and stuff are quite limited, but they're there. I could connect people with a few different things that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
But I actually, in some ways, although it was a really kind of rocky and not always very clearly led process of my learning Burmese, I feel like it was actually valuable to have to try that hard in a way, because it made me find out, okay, how motivated I really am to learn the language.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, it made me push for like, what do I think is going to be a really good method? And instead of just going to something that's already established, to go with what I really prefer and what really seems to work well for me. So what that ended up being is GPA, growing participating.
Right, yeah, we just had a,
So I didn't know about it for the first really long stretch of my language learning, but I started to get to know more about it. And I didn't follow, exactly per hour or exactly this method, but I got a lot of ideas from it, of how to use pictures and wordless books and things like this to interact with things. I guess you're encountering sort of a situation in daily life through a video or through a picture or a book, and then you can interact with it a little more like, maybe like, in some ways a little more like a kid would, right? Because they're just doing life and they just hear about it as they encounter it.
Yeah, and experiencing. It's experiential learning, so it's a right and left brain thing that we talked to Matthias about, kind of in depth about it in that interview. But so I mean, it is interesting because you were self-directed and had enough self-drive and discipline to actually do it, but not like at a tourist level. I mean, you're motivated because you have to live and survive in the environment, and that is a whole nother level. I mean, that's not, okay, where's the bathroom, how much does this stuff cost, which is, a lot of people, I speak the language. No, you don't, I mean, that's nothing. But what I was gonna ask was, how did you deal with this, with the script? And I mean, were you using IPA originally to learn it, or did you start IPAing things later? And I mean, how did you, because the script is a big thing itself.
Right. When I first had contact with Burmese, first came in contact with it, I had no linguistics resources, no linguistic studies behind me at that point. And so that was definitely one of the hard things, that I had no ideas about language learning, nor about languages in terms of
analyzing language.
So I didn't have the APA, for example, IPA, for example, and that was a major setback. If I had a recorder or had thought of how valuable it would be or something, that would have helped a lot. But meanwhile, I was trying with my English spelling system
phonetically,
to write down these things that people were just giving me as translations of things in English. So it was a horrible foundation, but I really wanted to know it, so I just worked with it and pushed through it and asked different people, and I started to observe, like, once I had a few words, that is good, or how are you, or
and
how much
you used it a lot though too, right? I mean, it wasn't just sort of like, I hear it and do. You were it's constant usage, right?
So, but even when it was really, back when it was just the bare bones, really my first, week of 10 words or something, I started listening, and I think maybe that just was natural for me or something. Everywhere I heard the word good, then I was like, oh, I know that word, and what is it connected to, and how does it work, and stuff. So I think that was a big part of the process.
Well, since the linguistics training, and since you've had to suffer through linguistics classes and courses, which are not easy for people, not easy, have you found it to help you in learning or dealing, well, obviously for analyzing language, we know that's there, but as far as learning a language, or if you were to teach, let's say now that you could facilitate other people learning Burmese, have you contemplated that or doing that, or?
To a degree, like, because I have learned Burmese here, and some people have noticed that, then others who...
Well, you speak Burmese, I think they're going to notice that.
Others who have some interest in that have asked me questions, or if they know someone who has interested. So I've done some, giving people ideas or connecting them with Burmese speakers that I know. So that's a lot of fun. And then...
but it has the linguistics training helped you.
Right?
Yes, it helped you, Do you wish you had it beforehand?
I do! Especially on some of the sound stuff, that IPA stuff is a really big deal.
Yeah, because the sounds don't exist in English, so you're... What am I...
Even conceptually, even if I wasn't writing it down, but to think, there must be a place of articulation and a manner of articulation that makes this thing come out of their mouth, you know? And so then you can start to conceive it at least, instead of just thinking,
you can try to
that is nothing.
You come up with an idea of like, I should try to make this. It's like, some people say like it's gymnastics for the tongue, right? Well, I mean, for me, for example, the worst case scenario for that stuff is like the click-stop languages in sub-Saharan Africa. I'm never going there because I do not want to deal with that stuff, you know? I mean, I don't know how you say you're drowning because they can't hear you, you know? They can't hear you very far away. But anyway, but no, but the linguistics, because there's a big misconception that, number one, linguists are monolingual. Well, I've never met a field linguist, have you, that's monolingual? It can't exist. It just doesn't exist. So that's a big misconception. Number two, that we don't know how to learn languages. That's another big misconception. And then linguistics training doesn't help you. Yes, I think because everyone I know who learned languages before, they studied academically linguistics or got degrees in linguistics, graduate degrees, they found it much more difficult than they do now. Like, you know what to look for now, right? Like, you have an idea of like, I'm gonna go into this, and maybe this has to do with their kinship terms, which is probably pretty big, right? Burmese. Yeah, I would have guessed that. And so that means they probably have a whole system of honorifics, because everybody. Are you ever really talking to like equals in Burmese? I mean,
not very easily.
No, yeah, because Japanese is really bad that way. It's like very few, like the verbs show the honor system, for example. But see, those are things that you can go in knowing that you're looking for. Once you've been trained, you're like, okay, instead of like, oh, they don't just say uncle, uncle, because that's not precise enough. You probably have a term for the mother's brother or the father's brother. That
in
sort
Burmese,
of.
that one's not quite as specific somehow. Yeah,
okay.
It's like kind of uncle can be a little bit generic.
Yeah. Well, something interesting that I'm not certain about, but I'm kind of guessing that the majority of Burmese is more like a lingua franca, right, for Burma. It's a L2, right? It's a national cohesive thing because other people are speaking whatever Shan, Karen, and things like that, right? So does that mean that you can get by with not perfect pronunciation? You know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Because Thai is not like that way.
Right.
The Thais will. I mean, there's differences in how Thai is spoken throughout the country here, but they want you to speak a certain way, or they're going and they look at you crazily. Stu J talked about this in one of his videos.
Okay.
This guy's brilliant at Thai. But anyway, in the case of Burmese, are they more accepting of how do they look at you as a non-Burmese person speaking Burmese? Do they drop and have heart attacks? Or
to get the really honest answer, you'd have to ask them.
Yeah.
Because they may or may not tell me.
Well, but the reaction to you, I mean, you had to see them shocked,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, people have been shocked. People, sometimes you get the idea they're inviting you over for a meal.
Yeah.
Because they've just never met anybody like you.
Oh, well, you're like the
before.
novelty, right?
Yeah.
You had to bring the zoo home, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's there. But you also asked about...
Go over, watch her.
Sometimes, like, parents will tell their kids to come talk to me or something, and the kids are like, what? Just go talk to somebody just because you're supposed to talk to them. What are you supposed to say to them, right? But...
Talk about their shoes. That's always good.
Sure. That's a good start, except inside somebody's house where the shoes are not part of the picture. Yeah. But in terms of, like, Burmese there's an ethnicity called Burma.
Yeah.
So that's the majority people in Myanmar, but there are a lot of other people groups, like you were saying. And so, for sure, there's a big mixture of accents. And some of it is just even the Burma people from one place to another, like in many countries, don't sound exactly the same. So I've almost never heard feedback, either directly or indirectly. I hope I'm listening closely enough that I hear the indirect stuff too, but I'm kind of, that was actually wrong pronunciation. Sometimes I'm kind of sad about that. I think, they might be too forgiving because of other things that they've heard.
And you're trying to get to that higher level now.
Yeah. But there is definitely a degree to which people just adapt to how each other talk.
Right. Is there a prestige dialect or accent for Burmese? I mean, is Yangon is that considered the like
I would think
accent
so.
or
Since a lot of my language learning and exposure has ended up being here in Thailand rather than there, I feel like I don't have the greatest grasp always on the overall picture, but that would be my first.
Well, okay.
Guess,
what are you getting? Your interaction with Burmese people in Thailand, are they from all over the Myanmar, or are they from this one location? Because if you get them from all over, then you're really getting that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, because then it means you get better, because then you get used to hearing different accents, and then they understand you well. You know, you're saying something that's pretty standard then, and not some sort of rednecky Burmese to label it something like that. But yeah, because that happens in every language. Yeah, but have you considered? Do you know other languages? Are you considering other languages? Do you have other languages, or?
For sure, at this point, English is
the
one I
well,
know best.
I was surprised about that.
And then Burmese is the second.
Yes.
So I've had a little bit of time in some other languages, but I don't know what I might do next. Something that I've had on my mind for a while is. My parents actually both grew up speaking another, like a German language.
Oh yeah?
Grew up as in when they were real little, that's what they spoke until they went to school and stuff. So
Heritage language.
I've often thought, why didn't they teach us?
Yeah.
Why did they pass that on to us?
Was that sort of a language attitude thing? Because a lot of people, some immigrants, mindset is like, well, I will not do that because that's a whole other ball of wax. But I mean, we can kind of a little bit talk about that because, for example, in Canada and United States, loads of immigrant waves came over, and there were pockets. For example, German was only spoken in the United States until World War I. Then they that kind of changed. But there were whole cities like Minnesota and that area. That always spoke that language. In other parts, mainly the coast, where you could land ships. That's where people were pockets of different languages. And in Canada, that happened. The French, and then actually Celtic, the Celtic languages, which were in St. John's Island and Nova Scotia. I've actually spent a lot of time in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah, and mainly New Brunswick and Quebec, a little bit in Toronto. But yeah, the Maritimes I know really well. But I was a guest lecturer once at the University of Moncton, and but anyway, what I was going to say was a lot of people felt like they don't want their kids to be stigmatized, so they refuse their language, other than Hispanics, which is one of the things that's helping Spanish just dominate the whole new world. But anyway, but that's interesting though. So I mean, you're going to try to kind of just do that like a hobby thing,
I'm
you
thinking
think?
Of, maybe I can, I feel like I've had enough, I can use my methods, and I've had enough, as a kid I was kind of exposed, but I never conversed in it, never communicated in it, so I feel like it maybe wouldn't be too horribly hard.
Yeah, it can reignite it. There's something in there, like deep down, you know? No, I mean, because my first language wasn't English either, and it's like, it's in there, you know what I mean? It's just, can you get to it, you know what I mean? But it's interesting thing. Do you find that you know more about yourself as far, because you learn things because you think that your world view is your language, and you find like you think you've expanded yourself through Burmese and I mean, is that part of the reason to do that? Do you think, like, to get an idea of sort of like your parents' background better and
for sure
and stuff like that?
Even going to Burmese, I didn't think of that as a conscious goal when I went into it.
But it happens, right?
As you go along, you just realize your perspective is widening and widening and widening, and going to something like this language of my parents too would be, widening it in a whole different direction in a lot of ways I expect than the one that Burmese went to. Yeah.
Right. Well, do you find yourself like sometimes you just want to say something in Burmese because it expresses your feeling or the situation, because you don't have it in English?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's something that's something multilingual people always have, because you're like, they're like, what are you doing? Why are you switching language? Well, because it's just that idea, that emotion, or that concept exists in that language, and it doesn't exist in English, and that really gives you a whole other outlet. of course, some people think you're crazy, but
Yeah.
you know, but that doesn't matter. You know, we don't need to deal with that. But yeah, so I mean that's pretty interesting though. So, but so that's interesting that you struggled your way through Burmese. How many years have you spent on Burmese?
My first exposure was 2005, so
Okay.
it was like 9 years already.
Ooh, yeah.
But there were times in there where
But
I
it's
didn't
not
have
solid.
any
It's not
contact for
solid.
2 years.
Yeah,
so-
this wasn't full-time solid study.
Yeah.
Yeah. How many hours do you think, if you were to, you know, try to put it to just?
I've tried to count that up before. I decided my year living there was about 3 months because.
Oh, really? You were there that long?
No, I was there for nearly a year. But
Yeah, that's a
in
long
terms
time.
of language learning.
No, I know,
what
but
did
a year is still a long
accomplish?
time.
Yeah. And then I did a 3-month intensive course.
Oh, really?
So that's how I decided. Okay, this, you know, the first one.
3 months intensive is.
And that, and then I spent about a year and a half more where it was sort of my full-time focus that was here, like
Oh, yeah?
trying to get tutors and people to talk with me on a daily basis, where that's what I gave the majority of my
Oh.
time to. So adds up to 2 years-ish of sort of
It's
as
solid,
my main
solid.
focus.
Yeah, solid 2 years.
But it was
dispersed.
Yeah.
So do you think that, okay, so you came here, so now you would be, we're using FSI, DLI, you're like a
Yes.
3, right, now?
I think the last time I was tested I was 3+ or something, so I might
Oh,
be
really?
around 4.
Oh, that's
But
That's
but my
really
reading
high.
and writing definitely lags
well, of
behind
course.
that.
Yeah, but we're just talking about
focusing
comprehension
I
and
focused on conversation
Yeah.
and stuff. Yeah.
okay. Okay. So that's high, people. But I want to know, like, how much did you gain when you came here to Thailand? Do you think? Where were you at when you came to Thailand, as opposed to you're like
Oh.
almost a 4 now? You're like say a 4- or something at this
Okay.
point. So were you at a 2 when you came here? Do you think?
I think I was tested even. It was like 1+ maybe.
Ooh,
It wasn't quite
that's
2, I
huge.
don't
That's a
think.
huge jump. That's a huge. You know, however, I don't know if you know this, but most people who graduate degrees in undergraduate languages, like whatever German or French or
Right.
something, that only do that in that country and don't live the other place, they rarely ever hit 2 when they test it later. So these marks are very important because they signify huge knowledge and huge thing, and that's 4- is high.
For me, I'd say it's like really relational, right? So if I was just here studying from books, I would never
Yeah.
have made it there. But
Yeah.
because I interact with people
Right.
and I actually build friendships on it and stuff. And
Well, you have to
for
do
their
things too.
patience, you know.
Well, I mean, you know things like shut the door and
Yeah.
lift the window. I mean, all these things that other people have to consciously study, and that's part of actually knowing the culture. Well, I mean, you probably could tell someone how to make rice in Burmese, right?
I guess so.
For example, right? I mean,
so.
I don't know if you know.
I don't know that I would sound super smooth, but
No, but
they would be able to make rice.
But I mean, those sort of things. Oh, you can definitely give directions easily,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, you've had to do that. So I mean, those sorts of things are things that people who go through they don't learn those things, and they come out missing these big chunks, you know, or they don't know, like, put your socks on, or not that they wear socks in Burma, but but that's just an example. The things you learn as a child, the first things you learn are body parts, and people are usually, if they go to a university, last thing,
Right.
they don't know that stuff. They can't say, oh, I fell and I got a stick in my side. They don't. They don't. I mean, that stuff's important. I broke my leg. The bone's sticking out. They're still mumbling. Where's the bathroom? Where's the bathroom? And
It's the only kind of help they know how to ask
yeah,
for.
yeah, I know. But see, this
The problem.
But that's. But you being in and like. Is there a big talk about snakes and stuff like that? I mean, like, or monkeys and tigers probably too at the border. Because we're in the area of between here and Burma. There's tigers. There's loads of tigers. So that's cool. But I mean, it's part of the culture. So she's gonna know that stuff. Whereas somebody's learning in Iowa or something, the last thing they're gonna, I don't need to know tiger in Burmese. You know what I mean? But it's
I
actually.
probably learned apple, which is not the easiest fruit to buy actually in Myanmar.
Yeah, it doesn't probably exist, right?
It's kind of expensive
Yeah.
and not very yummy.
Yeah. But anyway, so I mean, that's I think it's important to emphasize the fact that the field linguist has a lot more actual time in the actual community and actually learns the language like well, you're trying to be an insider, which is something that people who are doing it like at home on their own, or even in a university in a different country, they're always an outsider because they're always trying to, well, how do I do this, or how do we say this in English, or how do I express this? And it's not, you kind of have to give that up, don't you? I mean, you have to quit with this. Well, in English, that's gone. I mean, you have to kind of get to this whole thing about the fact that there are no socks, there are no apples, and yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah, I don't know. Robert, do you have any questions as our cameraman, Robert, wanted to throw in there?
No, I think you covered it pretty good. It's been an interesting interview.
Yeah. Well, that's what I had to ask. I think you learned a lot from Tiffany, our guest expert on Burmese, and wish her well in her continued linguistics endeavors. And thanks for watching, and thank you, Tiffany.
Thanks, Christophe.
Okay.
Thanks all.
We'll see you next time.